All right, so welcome back. So I wanted to talk a little bit about local storage. So to be honest, local storage is a topic I wanted to teach you at some point. I wasn't really sure where it would fit in. And then all of a sudden, right inside this app, I had a need for it. And I said, perfect. Let's tell them about local storage. Even though this is in the JavaScript objects unit, it'll be fine. So maybe I should have made the title of this JavaScript objects and local storage, because to be honest, it's separate, but it was a good opportunity to put it in for this Dice Without Friends app. So what is local storage? Local storage could also be called client-side web storage, would be another name for it. There's a couple different mechanisms for doing this client-side storage. So this is things that are not saved on your back end. It's just like saved in your browser, almost like a cache, except for it's more like a database. There's things called IndexedDB, which is really popular, but we're going to learn about an even simpler thing, session storage and local storage. What these are is quite literally it's just an object that persists, which is tremendously useful. And so session storage, so they're similar but different. Session storage is an object that persists only for the session. So like if they've got Chrome open, it's only for that session. And then local storage is one that persists even if they close the browser and open back up. So this is really useful because it's an easy way to keep things like across page refreshes and different things. But the downside is if they're using, like, let's say they use a Windows machine and a Mac and they like save some things on their Windows machine, it is only on that machine. So that's a downside of local storage. But there are like little things that are handy to keep, and we're going to keep the fastest finish with this mechanism. If you look at the documentation, you can see that the way to interact with this object is to call like local storage dot set item. It's key value pairs. So you just give it a key, which is almost always a string. I would recommend you always use a string, and then a value. Technically, there's some limitations on the value. The value has to be something that could be converted into a string and pulled out of a string. So you can't store like complex objects with functions on them that wouldn't store, because it has to be something that can be written to a string and pulled out. But a lot of the things can do that. And then you can also get an item by calling get item and passing in the key, which is a string. You can use this syntax, which is fine. Some people really like the syntax. But you can, if you want, use an even simpler syntax and treat it just like a plain old object. So instead of saying like set item and passing in a key and a value, you could actually just say dot key, right? So I won't go into the details about why this one has quotes and why this one doesn't. It works fine unless you're using a compiler. Let's just leave it at that, right? So it works fine. You just drop the quotes and you just say dot key, and then you pass in some value. Here that value is a string, and I put it in quotes. But I mean, you could just as easily put in like 5 or just any old number, right? And it'll work just fine. And then to get something out, you don't actually have to say get item. You could actually just say dot key, and then it'll get it for you. So just to kind of look at an example, one thing you should do if you're trying to pull something from local storage is see if it exists, because if it doesn't exist, it'll give you undefined. And if something is undefined, that means it just doesn't exist. And if you say if and something is undefined, it'll be false, right? So if it is defined, so it does exist, then you might want to do something with it. So here we're just passing it to a fictitious function. And so you might want to do something with it. If it doesn't exist, in kind of our fictitious example here, we're just setting it. And the way we're setting it is using the simpler syntax where we just say my key name equals 10. So that's exactly what we're going to do for this fastest finish feature. So we're going to save off a variable, and then when we load the page, if it exists, we're going to display something. So that's the idea. So let's go ahead and open back up our game controller, and right up in the constructor, let's just say if local storage dot fastest finish. So if it exists, we're going to do something with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some jQuery to set the text on something. Let's go look at our page to see what the text is we want to set. It's just below the total score. There it is. Just below the total score, fastest finish message, and it's an ID, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and flop that on my keyboard. Looks like I grabbed a little bit too much. And say, hey, I want the ID for fastest finish message. And then the message that we're going to send is we're just going to say fastest finish equals local storage for fastest finish. I'll tell you what, I'll go into a second line here just because it's kind of getting to be pretty lengthy. And then we'll add the units of rounds. So if it exists, display it. So that's one thing we need to do. Now with the code we've written so far, it will never exist, right? So we're going to need to actually make it exist. And the place where we're going to make it exist is down here when we finish the game. What we're going to do is we're going to see if we should update this local storage variable. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm just going to get on my clipboard just so I don't have to keep typing it, is we're going to say if it does not exist, then what we want to do is we definitely want to write to it, right? So fastest finish is equal to this dot rounds complete. So if it doesn't exist, definitely write to it. We also want to write to it, so or if this dot rounds complete is less than that value. Local storage fastest finish. By the way, there's some efficiency things here. I think if you dereference it once, then it's slightly more efficient. But to be honest, I'm not worried about it. We're talking about microseconds here. So if this dot rounds complete is less than local storage fastest finish, or if it doesn't exist, then set it. So at this point, we should be able to actually use this feature. You can see that our game is still set to 500, so it shouldn't take us all day to succeed. So I'm going to click on refresh. And then what I want to do is I just want to get to 500. So I'll stop there at 450. So now I'm in round 2, and you can see I'm going to go over. So I'm going to hit stop. It says you finished in 2 rounds. And now here's where the magic comes. When I hit new game, it should pop in a fastest finish. And there it is. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to win in fewer rounds. So I hit refresh a couple times there until I got a better roll. So here you can see I got 700 right off the go. So it says you finished in 1 round, and my previous best was 2. And as soon as I hit new game, it'll update that to be the 1 round. Just so you kind of know more about it, you can also blow it away by looking in the Chrome DevTools. So inside the Chrome DevTools, if you go to Resources, Local Storage, File, Fastest Finish, if you blow it away, and then you come hit refresh here, you can see that it no longer exists again. So that's a good way to kind of do testing. So the next thing we want to do is we want to bump it up to, instead of 500, oh, that was a good one. We want to bump it up to 10K, and we want to do some testing around that. So instead of 500, which was a great test, we're going to bump it up to 10K. Starting to feel bad that this is not a constant. If you wanted to make it a constant, what the heck, I'll make it a constant. I'll go put it in the slides. If you wanted to make it a constant, what you do is you don't have to put it on the prototype. You just put on a score to win. I'll choose to use the uppercase there, and then I'll just use that variable instead. So there I've got a score to win. I guess technically I should put it at the top. Note that if you put it at the top, you're going to have to do some name spacing. So I'm going to instead put it after the constructor so that I don't have to declare that that namespace exists. All right, so now I've got 10,000. So now I come over here and I refresh my page. And so now, apparently I wanted 2 rounds, good for me. If I get 500 right off the go, so I'll get 550 here and I'll say stop. You'll notice it does not say that your score is done. So you have 2 options to test this. One is to play to 10,000, which I do not recommend. Or the other is to cheat somehow. So what we're going to do to cheat is we're just going to modify the value of total score directly. Let's show you how we can do that. So what you can do is in the console, you can actually type messages, right? The problem is though, I mean, right now we don't have any variables to look at, right? So if we tried to look for the game, I mean, there's nothing defined called game. Just for testing, what we can do though is you can see we made this dice round control or dice game controller. We just don't happen to have any references to it. If we wanted to, though, we could just say game equals this. Note that I didn't put the word var in front of it, and that was intentional, and that makes it a global variable so that I've got access to it. So now let's go cheat more efficiently, right? So right now what I've got is I've got the score here, and so what I can do is I can say game, and it'll tell me, hey, this game exists. And if I say game total score, I could just say, hey, my total score is 9,800. So now I've just kind of got that stored in here. And so now if I score like 400 points here and I hit stop, I should have won the game, right? Because I went in there and I just modified the JavaScript model object, and I won in one round, and then I hit new game, and I can see that I'm now at one round there. So this is a good warning as well, is that it's really easy to kind of hack into JavaScript things. So there's some security holes here with web development, but it's kind of neat that like once you make that variable, then I mean it exists, and you can play around with it. So I mean if you wanted to say game.roundsComplete equals 99. Guess what? As soon as you come back, as soon as you finish this round, stop. You finished on round 101. I'd have to think about why it's 101. That's because it made 100 complete and it displayed 101. All right, so some cool stuff. Used local storage to implement it. Hopefully you kind of learned a little bit about local storage, and then you also learned a little bit about my hackery there and my tangents at the end. Maybe that was worth your time investment. So once you've got this complete, you've got the score updated the way you want it. Assuming you're taking this class for a grade, you need to go ahead and submit it. And we were all done with Dice Without Friends. All right, I'll see you next time when we start talking about the lab. See you then. Bye.